The existence of comic fandoms, I think it keeps the characters alive and keeps the fans connected to these characters in some way. I'm more of a DC fandom type of person. I like DC characters, and I like the way they do, like the recent event where they introduced us to all these characters and what's going on in this universe. And I think that keeps characters that are in the comic books alive in all these motion pictures that they are creating. And I think it creates that sort of relationship between the audiences, the comic book creators, and all the studios that are creating these stories. And because these fandoms, for me personally, I feel like they keep you young as a child. You feel excited because you're reading a comic book and now you're getting a story about it. And I think it's really key to the industry.
In some ways, I feel like I've always been on the outskirts of the comics culture, and I wouldn't say I specifically belong to a particular tribe within the comics world. But I guess if I had to say, choose one particular genre that, for example, I've got the most of them on my bookshelf, it would be the kind of autobiographical memoir type comic. For me, again, it's so much about just people sharing their authentic experience of life and kind of connection that I get through reading other people's. Maybe I'm just really nosy, I don't know. But I think it's so wonderful to connect through other people's life stories through the medium of comics, and it's that combination of pictures and words together that is kind of like nothing else really. I know we have film and we have books and there's some amazing stuff out there, but comics does it in a way that none of these other things quite do. I wouldn't say that I'm a, again, I've dipped my toes in all genres of comics, and I really appreciate the medium in all genres. But I don't know if that answers your question.
I mean, I'm like a big fan of my friends and peers' comics, but like I didn't grow up reading Marvel or DC or Archie or anything like that. I read like Bart Simpson comics and like the Beano. Sometimes when I could get it from the corner shop, our local library had like one tiny little graphic novel shelf, and I read everything on that wasn't a superhero comic or manga. So I almost think that like, because I just felt like I didn't know anyone who was into that stuff, so I didn't really feel like it was like my thing to get into. So yeah, basically no. I think maybe it's just like I wouldn't necessarily use the word fandom, because I know people who are such big fans of things that if I was like, oh yeah, I'm in this fandom, they would probably be like, oh, asking me questions about stuff that I'd then be like, oh, I'm actually can't answer that because I spend all my time drawing comics. So I'm just like not into it enough. But yeah, I'm definitely like a fan of a lot of media. A lot of the comics I read are like, again, webcomics by people I know, or like graphic novels that are part of the YA industry. So I have like, that's an interesting thought, or like, oh yeah, I've met this person at this thing, more than it being the kind of thing that has like a really big following. I mean, I think that all media affects how someone creates something. There's no way of like writing free of context. You're writing in the time that you're in the society that you're in, and all of the stuff you've ever read or watched or whatever has gone into your brain, and that's probably what you're like spitting back out. Obviously, fantasy, so like D&D is born out of like war games and stuff, right? Original D&D, that's its origin, and a lot of fantasy video games in the same area, like World of Warcraft and stuff. There's so much stuff that stems from that, and there's also a lot of stuff that stems from like Tolkien. And so a lot of these games, like the mechanics are set up to be like about campaigns of colonialism against other peoples who are like, there's no such thing as like a faceless orc horde or like a faceless zombie horde in real life. In real life, if you're thinking about a conflict, the people on the other side are people, like every single time, right? So I think that I'm interested in how fantasy, I obviously think that people are thinking about that now. Or people are thinking about it critically, or they have tried to like abstract it so much that it's like it's totally its own thing. But like to a certain extent, there's like a lot of that stuff. I think also the sort of editor criticky brain of being like, why don't I like that, can be really helpful to being like, well, why would I like that? What would be important for me to write? What would be meaningful for me? When I read something that I love, where I'm like, oh, this romance like really interests me, what is it that's happening there? And like, what parts of that is something I would like to be able to incorporate into my own writing?
I don't know if I feel like I'm part of any at the moment. I like a lot of comics, but I've not really engaged in the sort of online culture in a good while. I really liked being on like Tumblr's like teens early 20s. I thought it was really cool. Comics fandom I thought was hilarious. I remember when I was reading Runaways by Brian K. Vaughan, I was like halfway through the series and somebody had made like one of those where they like, normally it's like the animated music video where they do the sort of like scenes and sequences, but for this they had just taken pages of the comics and placed them side by side to music, and it was, what's that song, like 9 Million Bicycles? Yeah, right, that song. So and they had put like my two favourite characters, which I think were Chase and Jarrett, together in it, and the massive spoiler that I hadn't got to yet, and I remember just being like, no, so like that formed me on being like, I'm only going to engage in this when I've actually like read the whole book. Now, yeah, I love talking to people about it. I think like maybe from an online aspect of fandom, I'm not super active in these spaces, but I, you know, when I have a bit more time, I would love to get back into it. But from sort of like seeing people at comics conventions and stuff like that makes me really, really happy. And I love talking to folks about stuff and seeing, yeah, the things that they make. But no, I don't think I'm super active in any way, but I guess never say never. I think there's always time.
I didn't think that I was, because I don't really buy DC and Marvel, but I don't really get involved in all that. But then I thought, well, I'm very much into the kind of small press scene. So, you know, Ladies Do Comics every month, and I used to go to the live ones. And then, you know, there's the Awesome Comics podcast I listen to, and they have like a Facebook group and stuff. If anything, I'm part of the small press fandom. You know, I guess I'm involved in that level, and that is generally pretty positive. I think, you know, I think it brings a really positive kind of community to it, and I think that's really what a lot of fandoms are about. They're communities that have this shared interest. So I think generally they're probably a positive thing, but there is a definite negative side, and you know, I'm very wary of that, like this sort of Comicsgate lot, you know, and all that Zack Snyder stuff that went on, and I hate that there are groups of fandoms that feel like they have the right to comment on everything, especially with Black Hammer, because people are huge fans of it, as am I, you know, and I was really aware it's like, this is quite a huge world. And there are big fans, but I've already done a couple of pin-ups for it, and generally people have been pretty positive about it. And ultimately, Jeff, I trust his politics, I trust him as a person completely, and he's so good at dealing with that stuff, you know, like he just ignore it for one. And when he needs to, like when CG lot were banging on about stuff, he just goes, I don't support you in any way, you can stop reading my books, I'm fine with that. Yeah, it's a mixed bag for me, and definitely not something that I felt like I was part of, but I think I probably am, but in a looser kind of way around it, if that makes sense. But yeah, mostly positive, I think. But yeah, the mute block button comes in very handy for me. Just like, nah, don't want to know, not interested. Just mute the word Marvel half the time, and I find my life gets significantly better on social media.
I wouldn't say that I'm majorly a fan of any one particular thing more than another, simply because I just haven't got time to devote myself to one particular series over anything else. It's like in my spare time, when I am not working on my own personal comics, I play a lot of video games. So I suppose I'm more of a fan of certain video games, and if anyone like, you know, talks to me about a particular thing, I can just go, oh my god, Monster Hunter, blah, 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 and I could just like go nuts about everything about Monster Hunter, you know. So yeah, I'm you know, so for me, my leisure time, when it's not already taken up with drawing my own personal projects, is taken up by video games, you know. And also it's like there are some things that I've kind of become a bit more associated with, because actually doing fan art of some of those things has kind of got me some jobs within, and now I'm actually officially one of the artists and stuff. So Doctor Who stuff, for example. And the thing is, it's funny because like whenever I go and work on these sort of things, I always assume, oh no, I'm not really that much of a huge fan. I mean, I kind of like it. And then, you know, when I had to study up about it and when I had to do the work and everything, I realized actually, I know a lot more about Doctor Who than I thought I did. And then, because, you know, all the words that were coming up, I was like, oh, wait, I know about that. Oh, I know that character. Oh, I know that timeline. Oh, I know what happened then. I was like, oh, actually, okay. I guess I'm more of a fan than I thought I was. Yeah, the only things I sort of like allow myself to fangirl about really are things which are more adjacent to my work. So yeah, like things like video games, you know. So to me, it's like, I mean, I've done the odd little thing for video games, but I don't really do that much of it. So therefore, I'm allowed to be a fan of it and seen to be impartial, if you see what I mean, you know, because yeah, it's like when it comes to like anything in the comic world and stuff like that, if I pledge my allegiance too much to one thing or another, then, you know, I don't want to give like publishers or like fans the impression that, you know, I can't be hired for this, or I would not work on this project or whatever, you know. So I think that's also part of the reason why I think I'm very, very careful with how much I put online, or I suppose, or, you know, so yeah, normally it's like, I like doing fan art, but, you know, it's like I only allow myself time to do fan art if it's either something I really feel like doing, or if I'm commissioned to do some fan art and I go, yes, I like this, you know, this is cool. Then, you know, I'll put it on my socials and stuff like that. So yeah.
I am not, and that is largely because I've never really had positive experiences with comics fandom. For me, there's too big a culture of one-upmanship, of I know more and I know better than you do, and I, to be totally blunt with you, have no time for that. I don't need to compete with anybody else's encyclopedic knowledge of Batman. I grew up listening to punk music. Punk is a huge part of my identity, and I don't count myself as a part of that fandom either, for the same reasons, because I have no time for gatekeeping in general. So no, I am not part of any fandom, but I do, however, have energy for tearing those gates down with willing participants. So that is something that I am interested in. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I know that some people really find community and friendship within those circles, and that's so valuable and so important. But for me, that has never happened, and it's always just been a sort of, you don't belong here kind of space, and I just don't need that. So yeah.
It's really cool to see. Like, I feel the fandoms that I do see kind of spring up around like manga or like webtoon comics, like long series and stuff, and it's cool to see it, and it makes me want to get into it. Like, I'm like, what? Everyone's talking about this cool thing. I should probably go check it out, but I need to get around to it. Like, it's my problem. My to read pile is like atrocious right now, so that's kind of on me. But yeah, personally for me, I'm a very quietly passionate person about things. I feel like I was like really like racking my brains, like, what? I feel like if I'm on the fandom or something, I feel like I'm on the cusp of the Sonic the Hedgehog fandom. I love Sonic, and I know that people are like, there haven't been many good games. I'm like, that's fine, I don't mind. I love Sonic so much, and like working on the Sonic comic, just like for the anthology, and then I was checking out like the IDW. God, the IDW Sonic comics are so good. But I still need to sit down and like catch up. There's so much of them, and I just like, I follow a bunch of Sonic artists now from that, and like every time there's some art on my feed, I'm like, this is great, I love this. But like, again, I just feel like I don't do the engaging part, and I feel like fandom is like so much like of a community thing.
I mean, so many. Well, I mean, actively suggest that like it's something that like I'm actively engaged with in the Tumblr at the moment, and I'm not, because I'm so tired. Having said that, I am a member of a bunch of different fandoms, and I ain't shy about it. As we all know, I famously wrote an academic chapter about Supercorp. Possibly the first person ever to do this? Who's to say? But like, I was in the States archiving by myself in a motel room for like 8 weeks. And during that time, me and that Supercorp fanfic got very well acquainted. And that's all I have to say on that. But look in my eyes, I'm not telling no lies. So I would say Supercorp fandom, super important to me, because I feel like that was like, when I was like sort of getting into my gay source, the Supercorp fandom was something that I was like, where can I find gays online? And I was like, Alex and Maggie was like the gay ship that was just sort of like on TV that I was watching. And I was like, sort of contemplating, I was like, oh, well, like there'll be gays talking about that on Tumblr. And so that's, you know, how you start to find your people. And then like, obviously Riverdale, the Stephanie Brown fandom. That's a niche one, but like, I am like a moderator on the Stephanie Brown fan page. I haven't updated it for ages. I've been really bad. Any sort of like comics thing that I get into, like I get really into, and I want to sort of talk about it and look at crack ships about it. Fandom's like obviously like the worst of times, but also the best of times. So many terrible things that go on in fandoms. But then also like, I'm like, there's that random Supercorp user who gave me dating advice that time. And it was like, right? And it's like, you know, there's always some random person in the fandom who's like, if you ever need to talk about anything, my DMs are open. So you can like slide in and be like, hey, I want to ask someone out, like, give me advice. And they're like, oh, you got this, bro. And sometimes that's just what you need. So I don't know. I don't know what the question is. I just know that I have a lot of time for fandoms. I don't tend to sort of do a lot of fandom zines because I don't think my art is up to the caliber needed for fandom zines. Those things are fancy. The closest fandom stuff that has made it into my art would be that I keep making zines about girl bands, UK girl bands, because I love girl bands. And I want to do a zine about Xanadu so badly. I call it Xanadu.